It's recently been proposed that Apple could potentially move iPhone production to the US. Not only is that not going to happen, if it did, iPhones would be prohibitively expensive. Before we start, if you want to keep up to date with the latest Apple news and reviews, hit that subscribe button. Amid the changes in the US's economy, President Donald Trump seems to be of the opinion that Apple could quickly move iPhone manufacturing stateside. U.S. Secretary of State Howard Lutnick said in an interview, the army of millions and millions of people screwing in little screws to make iPhones would be coming to America. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt reaffirmed this statement. Leavitt was asked specifically about iPhone production in the United States and whether that type of technology could be brought over. Her response? Absolutely. Then adding that President Trump is under the impression we have the necessary labor, resources, and workforce for iPhone manufacturing. Sidestepping the political nature of this topic, iPhone production is most certainly not coming to the US. Let's talk about it. Making an iPhone is a global endeavor that relies on countless components and supply chains. Part of this massive misunderstanding seems to be Apple's increasing investment in US facilities. That includes a recent $500 billion investment in Houston. In this case, though, it's mostly for AI data centers, rather than being completely manufacturing related. It has increased manufacturing in the US before, though. Some of Apple's chips are made in Arizona in partnership with TSMC. That facility, though, started in 2020 and only started producing chips 4 years later. 4 years, and that is just for a single chip that goes into an iPhone, and not even the recent ones. Those chips aren't even the latest and greatest. They include the A16 Bionic and some SIPs for Apple Watch. They use a well-dated N4 4nm process. Even though a second facility is opening in 2027 or 2028, that will still only use a 3nm process. A third facility could produce 2nm chips by 2030, but this still leaves the US about 5 years behind Taiwan in terms of chip manufacturing. It's actually Taiwanese law that domestic chip manufacturers like TSMC are only allowed to produce chips abroad if they're at least a generation behind. That, again, is all just for a few chips, let alone the full manufacturing process of an iPhone. The requirements for that would be difficult to pull off. It would need huge swaths of land, plenty of primarily renewable energy, and access to tons of material and resources, all of which would be multitudes more expensive than what it's utilizing now. The goal of manufacturing an iPhone in the US would seemingly to be to avoid the tariffs being imposed on foreign-made goods. But as 404 Media points out in its excellent coverage, Apple sources components from more than 50 countries around the world. Even if we made the chips in the US and did the final assembly, many raw materials and components aren't found in the US. Other companies like Sony and Samsung manufacture different parts, like the camera and displays. Apple would not be able to avoid the tariffs because despite it being assembled here, there's zero chance of making the entire phone here. There would still be copious tariffs, adding to the bottom line of the iPhone COGS. The next issue for Apple to overcome would be finding labor to even work in these facilities. Many still associate China with low-cost labor, and while the cost of living and salaries are notably lower than the US, it's not as cheap as it once was. Apple and other manufacturers in China because of the wealth of manufacturing and assembly skill. There is very little shortage of incredibly skilled workers that are able to do the precise work needed. For Apple to pull off manufacturing iPhones in the US, it would take years, if not an entire generation, to get enough workers. Let's make the leap and say that Apple has solved all these other hurdles. It got the land, sourced the components, had enough skilled labor to do the work, and could actually make the phones here. In China, the average manufacturing salary is just under 14,000 American dollars per year. In the US, a conservatively low estimate puts the average manufacturing salary closer to 60,000, which means the labor alone would be, at a minimum, 4 times the amount that it costs now. According to a report by Simply Mac, an iPhone 15 Pro Max has about $35 to $45 in labor and intangibles. If we were able to take the low estimate of $35, that would balloon to $140. Again, just on labor. The short version of it all is this. Manufacturing iPhones in the US would be incredibly difficult, expensive, and basically infeasible. At a minimum, iPhones would be significantly more expensive than they are now. It would be years before any smartphone ever rolled off an assembly line. Don't expect Made in America to be stamped on an iPhone, especially anytime soon. Other manufacturing may shore up, and certain components could be possible, but that's about it. Keeping it civil, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments if we'll ever see a US-made iPhone. Otherwise, subscribe for more Apple news, and I'll see you in the next video.